Evan Carter walked into the large dining hall of the starship Horizon's Reach, thinking he did not belong there. He was a maintenance man, not an officer, not a diplomat. His shirt still smelled faintly of engine oil, even though he had changed into the best uniform he owned. The crew had been told this lunch was a formal event. People wore crisp jackets and buttons. Evan only wanted a quiet corner and a full tray of food after a long night of repairs. The hall was bright, full of long metal tables and the low hum of people talking. Flags of many human colonies hung from the ceiling. Some were new settlements where humans had built new homes on distant worlds. Others were older and proud. Today, a royal guest was traveling with them. She was not from Earth. Her ancestors had left long ago to start a new kingdom on a far world. Now they had rejoined the rest of humanity after many years apart. When Evan walked in, he noticed that everyone was standing to welcome her. The young woman walked with calm steps. Her long silver-blue gown shimmered under the lights. Her name was Princess Leora. She looked graceful, but distant, her face calm like still water. People whispered about her quiet beauty and her strange accent, soft and careful, as if she measured every word. Evan tried to stay out of the way, but when he checked the seating chart on the wall, he frowned. His name tag had somehow been placed right beside the princess's seat. That had to be a mistake. He wanted to trade with someone else, but all seats were already taken. So he sighed, picked up his lunch tray and sat down slowly, hoping no one would notice him. When the meal began, the servers brought warm bread, a bowl of stew, and a small glass of juice. Everyone around Evan looked stiff, too nervous to eat properly. The princess sat beside him, silent and still, her hands folded on the table, her plate sat untouched. Evan was hungry. He tore his bread and ate quietly. But out of the corner of his eye, he noticed the princess was not eating at all. He wondered if she disliked the food. Maybe she had different customs. Maybe royal people did not eat the way crewmen did. But something about her distant stare bothered him. He thought about how his mother used to teach him that sharing food was a sign of kindness. It was one rule she had repeated when times were hard. Always share even a small meal. Evan, it tells people they are welcome. Before he could stop himself, he picked up half of his bread and placed it on her plate. She looked at it in surprise. Several guests stopped talking. A few stared in shock, perhaps thinking he had done something rude. Evan blushed and tried to explain. "I'm sorry, Your Highness," he said quietly. "You haven't touched anything, and the bread's actually not bad today. Thought maybe you'd like a piece." For a moment she did not move. Then, very slowly, she turned to face him. Her eyes were an unusual shade of clear blue-gray. She studied his face as if she were reading a story written on his skin. "You share your meal," she said finally, her voice calm but curious. Evan nodded awkwardly. Just seemed like the right thing to do. She looked down at the bread again. Then she tore off a small piece and tasted it. People around the table watched in silence. When she finished chewing, she leaned closer, close enough that he could hear her whisper. "You're different," she said. Her tone was not judging, not mocking. It was full of wonder, as if she had found something she had been searching for, but never expected to see. Evan did not know what to say. He only smiled a little and went back to eating, pretending not to notice that half the room was now whispering about him. As the meal went on, the heavy air in the hall seemed to soften. The princess began speaking to a few of the crew. She asked them simple questions about their work, their homeworlds, and what they missed most about Earth. It was strange. Her voice still carried the grace of royalty, but her words were gentle, almost shy. Evan answered when she asked him about his job. He explained how he repaired hull plates and kept the ship running. She listened carefully, nodding like a student hearing something valuable. When he mentioned he came from a small town near the old Colorado Plains, her eyes lit with interest. "Was it green?" she asked quietly. "Yes," he said, smiling faintly. "Full of rivers and tall grass in the summer." She smiled for the first time that day, and it changed her whole face. Something about that small moment eased the distance between royal silk and worn uniform cloth. Lights in the hallway glowed dim blue, and the hum of engines filled the air like a low heartbeat. He was thinking about yesterday's strange lunch when someone walked into the room. Her eyes brightened as if he had just opened a door. "Everything," she said. "What the wind feels like. What people do when they rest. What smells fill their mornings. What love sounds like." Evan smiled at her list. "It's messier than you think. The wind can be dusty, the resting never lasts long, and mornings smell like burnt toast and coffee and love." He paused, searching for a word. "Love sounds different every time." Her face softened. "You make it sound alive. That's because it is," he said simply. They talked for a long time. He told her about his small town, his sister's garden, the old barn where kids painted their names on the wooden walls. Oh. She told him about her city in the clouds, glowing towers and streets built of glass, court dinners where every word was chosen carefully. Her life sounded elegant, but also lonely. "People watch everything I do," she said quietly. The window beside them showed the stars turning pale as the ship neared its next destination. The horizon's reach moved through the black sea of space like a bright arrow. The engines hummed softly, and crew members went about their work with calm focus. To most people, it felt like a normal flight. But Evan Carter felt something uneasy under the surface. Maybe it was the silence that had crept into the hallways since the princess's arrival. Maybe it was the strange glances exchanged between some of the guards. Could not say exactly, but he had worked on ships long enough to know when the air carried quiet tension. Evan was down in the lower decks, fixing a regulator valve, when the lights flickered for a moment. The hum of the main reactor coughed. At first, he thought it was just a small power shift. But then the alarm lights started flashing red. Code's loud voice echoed through the system, calling, engineering, report at once. Evan dropped his tool bag and ran toward the control hub. When he arrived, the chief engineer was shouting orders. Someone changed the security codes. The main power grid's not responding. Backup lines are locked. Evan leaned over the main board and saw it right away. Someone had tampered with the system from within. It was no accident. A loud tremor ran through the floor. The screens blinked red warnings again and again. Core instability detected. That meant one thing. The ship was in danger of losing its main energy heart. While everyone else scrambled to follow orders, Evan grabbed a tool pack and crawled down toward the maintenance tunnel. He knew the system better than any manual. The tunnel was narrow and hot. Sound of cracking wires filled the air as blue sparks danced across metal panels. He pushed himself forward on his elbows, sweat rolling down his face. At that moment, the door opened behind him. A soft voice said, "Evan Carter." He turned to see Princess Leora kneeling at the entrance to the tunnel. Her guards were arguing with her outside, but she was already inside, sliding toward him. "Should not be here," Evan said quickly. "It's dangerous." "You are here," she replied simply. He sighed. "That's different. This kind of work can get messy." "Then we will be messy together," she said with calm stubbornness. She followed him as he moved deeper. Tools clanked, lights flickered, and he explained each part of what he was doing. "These conduits feed energy to the stabilizers. I need to reroute current before the heat builds too high," he said. His hands moved fast, pulling open panels and connecting wires. Leora stayed close and handed him what he asked for. The ship shook again, harder this time. A loud boom echoed through the lower deck. Evan's radio kicked in with the captain's voice. "We're losing control of the reactor. Evacuate the lower section immediately." Evan turned it off. "Can't. If we leave now, the ship could break apart." Leora looked at him, her face pale but steady. "Then we must end this." Working side by side, they followed a trail of sparks to the broken fuse line. The air smelled of metal and electrical smoke. Evan's arm burned from the heat, but he kept moving. "Hold this," he said, handing her the end of a thick cable. She pressed it firmly in place as he sealed the final connection. There was a small explosion of light, then silence. The alarm stopped. The ship fell quiet, except for the low hum of power returning to normal. Evan sat back, breathing hard. Leora lowered the cable and looked at him. "You have saved everyone," she said in a whisper. He wiped his face with a rag. "We, princess, saved everyone." Her eyes lifted to meet his. He had never seen her look more alive. The faint glow from the repaired conduit reflected in her eyes, making them shine. She spoke again, voice trembling only slightly. "You risked your life without being asked. On my world, leaders order others to act. Here you simply act because it is right. That is what makes your kind powerful." Evan gave a small laugh. "I wouldn't call it power, just doing what needs doing." "You call it duty," she said quietly. "I call it courage." They climbed back out of the tunnel, covered in dust and sweat. The crew in the hall froze when they saw them appear from the corridor, alive and unharmed. The captain ran forward and saluted them both. "The crisis is over," he said, relief in his tone. "The council owes you our lives." When Leora stood there beside Evan, her gown torn and marked with soot, she looked less like a princess and more like a soldier. People bowed to her, but she turned her eyes toward Evan instead. Later, when the calm returned, she met him in the observation room. "Back home, my advisors will ask about what happened today," she said softly. "They will not understand that a man from a small town saved us not for glory, but for everyone's sake." Evan shrugged. "If they don't understand, tell them it's simple. People matter more than ranks. She smiled faintly. You remind me what being human truly means. The two stood watching the endless stars outside the window. Somewhere far below, her world was waiting for her return. She knew it would not be an easy welcome. Somewhere deep inside, Evan knew this was not the last danger they would face. But for now, as the ship glided safely through the quiet sea of space, both of them stood side by side, feeling the calm after the storm, each changed by the courage of the other. The horizon's reach slowed as it came closer to the shining world below. Through the ship's wide windows spread colors of blue and gold, the mark of Princess Leora's home planet. It looked calm from space, but everyone on board knew that below the clouds, politics were shifting like storm winds. The princess was returning home after many years away, and people whispered that her arrival could change everything. Evan Carter stood near the docking station, his tools packed but his mind unsettled. He had done his job and planned to return to Earth with the crew after the handover. Still, he felt a quiet pull, something that told him his part in the princess's story was not finished yet. He told himself it was just curiosity, but he knew it was more than that. When the landing doors opened, a wave of heat and bright sunlight filled the ship. Leora stepped out first, wearing a white cloak that shimmered softly in the light. Her guards followed, their armor polished like mirrors. Evan watched from behind, unsure if he should walk with her or stay behind. She turned slightly and said, "Come with me, Evan Carter. You were beside me during danger. You will stand beside me during peace." He hesitated. "I'm no diplomat, princess," she smiled. "You are more human than any diplomat I have met." He followed her down the long ramp into the Grand Plaza. The city rose around them, tall towers, shining bridges, and wide streets lined with flags. Crowds waited in silence. When they saw their princess, they bowed deeply, but the air felt heavy, not joyful. A group of older men and women in fine clothes stepped forward. They were the Royal Council. The first man bowed his head slightly. "Your Highness, welcome home. We feared losing communication with your ship. We heard rumors of malfunction." "Rumors are correct," Leora said calmly. "We were in danger. But our survival came not from protocol, but from courage." Their careful eyes turned toward Evan. The man looked puzzled. "A crew member?" he asked. "A human from Earth," Leora said. "He risked his life to save us." The council exchanged glances. The leader said, "A simple worker restored the royal cruiser?" "That sounds unusual." Evan gave a small shrug. "I just fixed what was broken." Leora stepped forward. "And that is exactly what this world needs. People who fix what is broken instead of pretending nothing is wrong." Her words echoed through the plaza. Some nodded silently in agreement. Others frowned. The noble families had long preferred ceremony to honesty. They did not like change. That night, a special banquet was held in the palace to celebrate her return. Evan sat near the end of the grand table, trying to act invisible, but he could feel curious eyes on him. The food looked beautiful, but tasted faint. The music floated softly. Everyone spoke in careful, polite tones. Then Leora stood and raised her glass. "Today we sit together in comfort," she said, "but yesterday we nearly died. We lived because courage and kindness still exist outside royal bloodlines." The room grew still. No one moved. Her gaze rested on Evan. "This man reminded me of what it means to care without measure or reward. Our people began as one. We came from Earth, from the same soil and the same will. We forgot that. We built walls of rank and pride. I say we should break those walls now," a few whispered behind folded fans. The council looked tense. The elder man who had greeted her earlier stood and said sharply, "Your Highness, such talk may weaken loyalty. Royal law forbids placing commoners before nobles." Leora met his gaze without fear. "Law is strong when it protects, but brittle when it divides," she said. "Tell me, counselor, would you have risked your life inside a burning engine to save strangers?" The man said nothing. Evan wanted to speak, but he knew to keep silent. He had done enough. The truth was already shining through her courage. Finally, Leora turned to the hall again. "If anyone still believes that compassion is weakness, then they have forgotten why we are here." She placed her hand over her heart and bowed her head slightly. The room remained silent for a moment. Then one by one, several guards and officers began to clap softly. The sound grew until even the musicians joined. The council could not stop it. After the banquet, she met Evan in one of the palace gardens. The night air was warm, and tiny white lights floated among the trees. She walked slowly beside him, her hands folded in front of her. "You should not have followed me into this world of politics," she said quietly. "It is sharp and cold." "Too late for that," he said. "We've already been through fire together." "A few sharp words can't hurt more than a reactor explosion." She laughed softly. "You make light when the room grows heavy. It is your gift." They stopped near a fountain where water shimmered like glass. "They will never see me the same again," she said. "That may be a good thing," Evan replied. "Maybe they needed to see you as human." She looked up at him, her face calm but her voice low. "You still speak like a man who does not know what he means to others." He started to answer, but she shook her head. "Do not speak now, not yet. Let actions speak first." In the still night, the sound of the fountain echoed softly. For a long time they stood in silence. Then, from somewhere far in the city, a faint cheer rose through the air. Word of her speech had spread quicker than she expected. Some people were already celebrating the idea of change. Leora smiled. "It has begun," she whispered. The future seemed uncertain, but for the first time, it also seemed bright. Morning came quietly over the tall towers of the royal city. The golden light stretched across the streets and touched the palace walls. Evan Carter stood by the window of the guest chamber he had been given. Even though the room was large and beautiful, he didn't feel comfortable there. He was used to small spaces, oil-stained floors, and the hum of engines. Here, everything was silent, clean, and still. It almost felt unreal. He thought back to the night before, to Princess Leora's speech. Her words had shaken the court. The people outside had cheered, but he had seen the cold eyes of the council. They would not forget being challenged so openly. Evan had seen power struggle before in smaller forms, inside ships or factories, so he knew danger when he smelled it. A servant brought him breakfast, but he barely ate. He was thinking too much. He looked out at the huge city and wondered what would happen next. Later, a quiet knock came at his door. When he opened it, Princess Leora stood there wearing a simple traveling cloak. Her hair was tied back, her face calm but serious. "Walk with me," she said. They stepped into the palace garden. The morning air smelled of flowers and distant rain. Birds flew in slow circles above the fountains. "The council is not pleased," Leora said after a while. "They think I let emotions rule me." "Well," Evan said, "sometimes emotion is the only thing that reminds people they're alive." She gave a small smile. "They fear change. They think kindness makes us weak. But the people outside the palace, they have begun to speak differently. They remembered their roots today. They remembered that they come from the same earth you do." Evan nodded. "That's something worth fighting for." "Yes," she said gently, "but I do not want more fighting. I want understanding." They stopped near a small stone bridge that crossed a stream. On the other side, a group of children waved. When the princess waved back, they cheered. For a moment, she looked just like any other young woman, enjoying a morning walk. "See," he said, "they already understand." She took a deep breath. "Sometimes I think the people are ready for hope, but the leaders are not. If they resist, everything could fall apart." Evan turned to her. "So what will you do now?" She looked at the water and said softly, "I will not give up, even if they call me foolish. I will keep reminding them that compassion is strength. And when they forget, I will tell them the story of the man who shared his meal. Evan laughed. That story again? Began everything, she said. It showed me what kind of world I wished to build. Suddenly a guard ran across the garden, his voice shaking. Your Highness, the council demands your presence at the hall immediately. There has been unrest at the east gate. Leora straightened. Unrest? Yes, the guard said. Some protesters and soldiers clashed, but there were no serious injuries yet. She turned to Evan. They feared change so much that they would use fear against their own people. Let me come with you, he said. She nodded once. When they arrived at the grand hall, several council members were gathered, their faces red with tension. The leader spoke sharply. Your words have divided the city. We must take control before rebellion grows, Leora answered quietly. You call it rebellion when people find their voices. I call it awakening, Your Highness, another said. Your sympathy for outsiders has caused this confusion. Evan stepped forward before he could stop himself. Outsiders. She's speaking for everyone, your own people included. Maybe you've forgotten that humans can rebuild anything if they work together. The leader narrowed his eyes. Stay silent, worker. You have no place here. Leora's voice rose, calm but firm. He has every right. Without him, this ship, this city, and all of you would have been lost. If you cannot respect that, then you have no right to call yourselves leaders. The hall went quiet. The sound of distant shouting from the city echoed faintly through the windows. Then the elder who had once scolded her finally spoke again, his voice softer now. Perhaps we have been blind. Perhaps kindness does not weaken a throne after all. Leora bowed her head once in respect. Let us prove that together. When the meeting ended, the streets outside began to calm. People lit lanterns in the houses, a sign of peace. News spread fast. There would be no punishment, no division. The princess's words had carried hope instead of fear. That evening, Evan stood with Leora on the palace balcony. The city glowed below them, warm lights shining through every window. The sky above was deep violet, stars starting to appear one by one. You have changed their world, Evan said quietly. Leora shook her head. No, you changed mine first. I only gave your gift to others. They stood in silence, the cool wind playing with her hair. Somewhere below, the people were singing softly. The sound reached them as a gentle echo, honest and real. When the time came for Evan to leave on the next ship, he found her waiting for him at the gate. She handed him a small metal token, engraved with 2 hands holding a loaf of bread. For remembrance, she said, so you never forget the day a meal changed to worlds. He smiled, closing his hand around it. And don't you forget to keep feeding hope. She nodded, her eyes bright in the morning light. As the ship lifted away, Evan looked back through the window, saw her standing there, small but unshaken, the symbol of a world learning again what it meant to be human. And far through the stars, the story of a shared meal and a whispered truth began to travel from planet to planet, reminding everyone that one act of kindness can reach further than any engine ever built.